It was January 8th, 1877. The temperature had dropped to 12 below zero. Scouts rode into Crazy Horse's winter camp in the Wolf Mountains of northern Wyoming just before dawn, their horses steaming in the dark. The message was simple. The army was coming. A cavalry column under General Miles was moving north through the snow, and they would reach the camp by midday. The band had, perhaps, 4 hours. In that time, they needed to dismantle a village of over 200 teepees, move the elderly, move the children, move the wounded, hide every trace of fire, every scrap of hide, every hoofprint in the snow, and vanish into a landscape that offered no cover, no walls, no place to run except deeper into winter. What happened next was not an accident. It was not luck. It was not the Army's failure to track them properly. It was a system, a set of practiced, exact procedures, refined over decades of movement across open plains. And it worked so completely that when Miles's cavalry arrived that afternoon and found only ash and trampled snow, they could not believe anyone had been there at all. This is how the Sioux moved an entire people in the dark. This is why they survived when the Army's own supply trains froze in place. The system had 4 parts. First, the teepee itself. Second, the logistics of fire and heat. Third, the erasure of tracks. Fourth, the coordination of movement under pressure. Each one was a solution to a specific problem the Army did not solve. And together, they explain why a band of Lakota people with children and elders could disappear from an open plain while soldiers on horseback could not catch them. But before we get there, a warning. What saved these people that night would, within months, be destroyed, not by force, by something slower and more certain, by the killing of the buffalo. Territory and the band. Crazy Horse's band in January 1877 was part of the Ochethi-Shakoving, the 7 council fires, what outsiders called the Sioux. The name itself was a foreign insult. It came from the Ojibwe word for enemies, corrupted by French traders into Sioux. But the Lakota, the Dakota, and the Nakota who carried that name had held the northern Great Plains for over a century. Their territory stretched from the Minnesota River west to the Yellowstone, from the Canadian border south into Nebraska, roughly 130,000 square miles of grassland, river valley, and mountains. The Black Hills, the Paha Sapa, sat at the center of this world, sacred, the place where the world was made. In the winter of 1876-77, that center had been invaded. Gold had been found there in 1874. The Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868 had guaranteed the hills to the Lakota forever. The Army had broken that promise in less than 4 years. Crazy Horse had refused to sign any treaty. He had fought at Little Bighorn 6 months earlier, in June 1876, when Custer's 7th Cavalry was destroyed. But the victory had brought the full weight of the Army's winter campaign down on him. Supplies were cut off. The buffalo were gone. By January, his band was starving and hunted. The camp in the Wolf Mountains was what remained, roughly 800 people, including 200 warriors. The rest were women, children, and elders. They had been moving for weeks, staying ahead of cavalry patrols. Now, trapped in deep snow with nowhere left to run, they had one night to disappear. The tipi, speed and structure. The first part of the system was the tipi itself. To an outsider, a soldier, a settler, a surveyor. A teepee looked like a permanent structure. It was a home. It took time to build. It was part of the landscape. This was the fundamental misunderstanding that cost the Army days of pursuit. A Lakota teepee could be dismantled in under 8 minutes. A practiced family could do it in 5. The structure was simple by design. 17 poles, most of them roughly 25 feet long, lashed together at the top with rawhide. The base was a 3-pole foundation, not 4 like the Comanche used, which required different lashing geometry and took longer. 3 poles meant faster assembly, faster collapse. The buffalo hide cover, sewn together and smoked until it was waterproof and supple, was lashed around the poles with wooden pins, no nails, no ropes that needed untying. Pull the pins, the cover fell free. Collapse the poles, and the entire structure was reduced to a bundle of wood and hide that could be loaded onto a travois, a drag frame pulled by a horse, in minutes. The duke cloth, the inner lining that hung 5 or 6 feet up the interior wall and created an insulating air gap, was simply unhooked and rolled up. The fire pit stones were scattered. The floor was swept. In the darkness of January 8, 1877, this speed was the difference between survival and capture. But speed alone was not enough. The camp also had to leave no sign of occupation, and that meant understanding fire in a way the Army did not. Fire and the erasure of heat. A cavalry column moving through winter needs fire. Soldiers need to cook food. They need to warm themselves, or they die. The Army's solution was to build large fires and tend them through the night. These fires left ash. They left burned wood. They left a signature that could be seen from miles away in snow, a dark patch, still warm, that showed exactly where a camp had been. The Sioux camp had fires, too. Roughly 200 teepees meant roughly 200 fire pits. But the fires were managed differently. Inside each teepee, a small fire burned on a bed of sand and stones. The smoke rose through the opening at the top, the same opening that let in light and air during the day. The fire was kept small, just large enough to heat the interior and cook food, and the fire was allowed to burn down completely before the teepee was dismantled. No coals, no embers, no heat signature left behind. The ash was scattered, the stones were turned over. The sand was swept smooth. When the camp moved, the fires had been dead for hours. By the time Miles's cavalry arrived, the ash was indistinguishable from the snow. This was not accident. This was protocol. Every family knew it. Children learned it before they could walk, and it meant that an entire village of 200 teepees could vanish without leaving a single warm spot for a tracker to find. But even this was not enough. There was still the problem of tracks. The snow and the erasure of passage. 8 inches of fresh snow had fallen in the 2 days before the scouts arrived with news of the Army's approach. The camp had been stationary for only 3 days. In that time, the snow had been churned into a maze of footprints, hoofprints, and drag marks. It was a record of occupation written in white. But snow had another property. It was constantly moving. Wind sculpted it. New snow covered old tracks. And if you understood how snow moved, you could use it as cover. The evacuation began at dawn, or slightly before. The band did not move as one group. Instead, they split into smaller bands of 30 to 50 people each. Each band had horses to carry the teepee poles and hides. Each band had elders and children distributed among the riders, and each band moved in a different direction. Some moved northwest toward the Yellowstone River. Some moved west toward the mountains. Some moved north toward the Tongue River. To a pursuing cavalry officer looking at the snow, it appeared as if the camp had exploded in all directions at once. The tracks multiplied. They crossed each other. They went in contradictory directions. By midday, when the snow began to fall again, a new system moving in from the northwest, the tracks were already being erased. The cavalry found the campsite. They found the ashes. They found the scattered stones. But they found no clear trail to follow. The tracks led in multiple directions. Some seemed to double back. Some seemed to go nowhere. By the time the snow stopped falling, even those confused tracks were gone. What had taken the Sioux 4 hours to accomplish, the complete erasure of a village from the landscape, would have taken the Army days to sort out. And by then, the bands were scattered across 50 miles of mountains and river valleys, moving deeper into winter, moving toward the agencies where they would eventually surrender. But the logistics of that evacuation, the actual mechanics of moving 800 people, including children and elders, through deep snow without leaving a trail, this is where the system revealed its full complexity. The coordination of movement. A night in the snow. Let's walk through what actually happened hour by hour on the night of January 8, 1877. Hour 1, 4 a.m. to 5 a.m. The scouts arrive. The camp is asleep. Teepees are arranged in rough circles by family band. The horses, roughly 1,200 of them, a mix of riding horses and pack horses, are hobbled in the valley below the camp, guarded by young men. The fires inside the teepees are still burning. Word spreads quickly. There is no panic. This is not the first evacuation. The band has been moving for months. Everyone knows their role. The warriors begin to gather. They will form a rear guard, staying behind to slow any pursuit. The families begin to move. Women start pulling down the dew cloths. Men begin to unlash the teepee poles. Children are woken and dressed in their heaviest furs and robes. The fires are allowed to burn down. This takes time. You cannot rush it. A fire that is still smoldering when you dismantle the teepee will reignite when the cover is removed and the wind hits it. So you wait. You let the fire burn to ash. You scatter the ash and the stones. You do this methodically, even though there is no time. This is the discipline of the system. Speed is not the same as panic. Hour 2, 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. The first teepees are coming down. The poles are bundled, the hides are rolled. The bundles are loaded onto travois, 2 poles lashed to a horse's sides with a platform of hides stretched between them. A single horse can carry the entire structure of a teepee, plus some additional goods. A family with 2 or 3 horses can load themselves completely in 15 minutes. But not every family has 2 or 3 horses. Some have 1. Some have none. These families share. A woman with a child and an elderly parent might have 1 horse. That horse carries the teepee poles. The woman and child walk. The elderly parent rides on another family's travois. This is where the system shows its real sophistication. It is not just about speed. It is about distribution, about making sure that the slowest people, the children, the elders, the wounded, are never left behind. The band has roughly 200 horses and 800 people. That is a ratio of 1.5 horses per person. But not all horses are fit for riding. Some are young, some are old, some are injured. The actual number of riding horses is closer to 400. The rest are pack animals. So the movement has to be choreographed. The horses that can carry people, carry people. The horses that can carry goods, carry goods. The people who cannot ride are distributed among the pack animals, taking turns, walking when they need to. Hour 3, 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. The camp is half dismantled. Roughly 100 teepees are still standing. The fires in those teepees are still burning down. The warriors are in position, watching the valley to the south for any sign of the army. The first group of families, roughly 150 people with their horses and loaded travois, begins to move. They head northwest toward the Yellowstone. They move slowly, keeping the horses at a walk. The snow is deep. The ground is uneven. A fast pace would mean someone falling, someone getting left behind. The second group is preparing to move. They will head west toward the mountains. The third group will head north toward the Tongue River. The timing is staggered. Each group leaves at roughly 15-minute intervals. This spreads them out. It means that if the army catches one group, the others have time to scatter further. The cold is intense. 12 below zero. The wind is picking up. But the wind is also good. It is erasing the tracks of the first group almost as soon as they are made. Hour 4, 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. The last teepees are coming down. The camp is now just poles and bundles and people and horses. The fires have been completely extinguished. The ashes have been scattered. The stones have been turned over. The rear guard, roughly 50 warriors under Crazy Horse, is preparing to move. They will stay in the campsite for another hour, then follow the other groups at a distance. If the army arrives before they leave, they will fight. They will buy time for the families to get further away. The second and third groups are now moving. The landscape behind them is a chaos of tracks, hoof prints, footprints, drag marks from the travois. But the snow is falling harder now. The wind is stronger. The tracks are already becoming indistinct. The first group is 3 miles away, moving into the foothills. They are invisible now. The snow is too thick. The darkness is too complete. Hour 5, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. The camp is empty. Every teepee is down. Every fire is out. Every family is either moving or preparing to move. The rear guard mounts their horses. They take one last look at the campsite, at the scattered stones, the trampled snow, the ashes that are already being covered by new snow. Then they turn their horses and ride north, following the tracks of the last group. Behind them, the campsite is already becoming invisible. The snow is falling. The wind is sculpting the drifts. By the time the sun rises, if it rises, the sky is dark and heavy. There will be nothing to see but white. Hour 6, 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. The army is still an hour away. The scouts have not yet arrived at the campsite. The band is scattered across 10 miles of mountains and river valleys. The rear guard is disappearing into the snow. By the time Miles's cavalry reaches the camp, by midday, as the scouts predicted, the entire village will have been gone for 4 hours. The tracks will be erased, the fires will be cold, the ash will be indistinguishable from the snow. The army will find the campsite. They will find the evidence of occupation, but they will find no trail to follow, no direction to pursue, no way to catch a people who have simply vanished into the winter. The moment of arrival. General Miles's cavalry reached the campsite at approximately 2 p.m. on January 8, 1877. The temperature was still dropping. The wind was still strong. The snow was still falling. What they found was a village that had simply ceased to exist. The scouts reported scattered stones, cold ash, trampled snow, multiple trails leading in different directions, all of them already being erased by new snow. No bodies, no wounded left behind, no sign of panic or disorder, no indication of which direction the band had gone or how far they had traveled. Miles's cavalry attempted to follow the tracks. They split into smaller groups and pursued different trails. But within hours, all the trails became indistinguishable. Within a day, the snow had covered them completely. The cavalry was left riding in circles through deep snow, pursuing ghosts. It took the army 3 weeks to locate the band again. By then, they had split into smaller groups. Some had headed for the agencies to surrender. Some had headed for Canada. Some had scattered so completely that they were not found until spring. The evacuation of January 8, 1877, was not a victory. The band was still hunted, still starving, still being pushed towards surrender. But it was a demonstration of something the Army could not match: the ability to move a complex, vulnerable population, including children and elders, through hostile terrain in winter, without leaving a trace, without losing anyone, to the cold or to capture. This was not luck. This was not toughness. This was a system refined over generations of movement across open plains. The system begins to fail, but the system had a fatal dependency. It required buffalo. A teepee could be dismantled in minutes, but it required buffalo hides to be waterproof and supple. The poles could be carried on travois, but the travois were pulled by horses, which required grazing land. The families could move through winter without leaving tracks. But they could only survive winter if they had meat. In the winter of 1876-77, the buffalo were gone. The great herds that had once covered the plains, numbering in the tens of millions, had been hunted to near extinction in less than a decade. Between 1870 and 1877, roughly 31 million buffalo were killed. Most were killed by hide hunters, men who shot them from a distance and left the carcasses to rot, taking only the hides for the leather market back east. By 1877, there were fewer than 1,000 buffalo left on the entire Great Plains. This was the real destruction, not the cavalry charges, not the battles, not even the broken treaties. It was the systematic elimination of the resource that made the system work. Without buffalo, there were no hides for teepees. Without teepees, there was no shelter. Without shelter, people died in winter. Without buffalo meat, there was no food. Without food, people starved. The evacuation of January 8, 1877 was a masterpiece of logistics and coordination. It saved 800 people from immediate capture, but it could not save them from what was coming. Within months, the band would surrender. Crazy Horse would be killed in a guardhouse at Fort Robinson in September 1877. The Lakota would be confined to reservations. The era of movement across open plains would be over. The system that had kept a people alive and free for generations would be replaced by dependency on government rations, by confinement to fixed territories, by the slow erosion of the skills and knowledge that had made survival in winter possible. If you're finding this account of survival and coordination useful, consider subscribing. We cover the untold logistics of indigenous resistance and adaptation every week. The echo in the present. The skills demonstrated on January 8, 1877, rapid dismantling, erasure of traces, coordination under pressure, the distribution of vulnerable people among available resources. These are not historical curiosities. They are still practiced in different forms by humanitarian organizations moving refugees through hostile terrain, by military units executing rapid evacuations, by emergency management teams coordinating the movement of populations ahead of natural disasters. The difference is that these modern organizations use communication technology, vehicles, and infrastructure that the Sioux did not have. But the underlying principle is the same. Move people quickly, leave no sign of your route, distribute the vulnerable among the strong, and maintain discipline under pressure. What the Sioux accomplished in 4 hours in 1877, modern organizations with radios and trucks and helicopters now accomplish in similar time frames. The system has evolved, but its skeleton, the logic of rapid movement and coordinated distribution, remains recognizable. Permanence and present. Today, the Lakota remain. The Pine Ridge Reservation, established in 1889, is home to roughly 28,000 enrolled members of the Oglala Sioux tribe. The Rosebud Reservation, the Standing Rock Reservation, the Cheyenne River Reservation, these are the territories where the Lakota live now, confined but enduring. The buffalo have been partially restored. In 2026, there are roughly 25,000 buffalo on tribal lands and in conservation areas across the Great Plains, a fraction of the millions that once roamed, but a recovery nonetheless. The teepee is no longer a primary shelter, but it remains a symbol. And the knowledge of how to build and dismantle it, how to move a community through winter, how to survive in extreme conditions, this knowledge persists. It is taught to children. It is kept alive in ceremonies and gatherings. The system that saved 800 people on a single night in January 1877 was broken by the destruction of the buffalo. But the people it saved were not destroyed. They adapted. They survived. They endured. If this story of logistics, survival, and the hidden systems that keep communities alive interests you, we've covered the history of another Great Plains nation, the Comanche, and how they moved their own camps across even more hostile terrain. That video is linked in the description below.